Hey guys, Third here with another episode of Boffer Basics. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a fitted cover for a bat. So the hardest part for me when making bat covers is getting the top circle to lay nice and flat. Now a lot of people recommend that you just use pantyhose or some sort of sheer leggings, or that you just make it like a sword cover, up and over, and then just clip and trim the dog ears and you'll have those little poofs. But I like the look of a nice multicolored and smooth circular top. So the process for that is actually pretty easy. You'll take whatever bat you're going to be making a cover for. In this case, this is an old broken bat that I just haven't gotten around to tearing apart. And try and find what you think is going to be the biggest part of it. Take a few measurements. In this case, I've already measured this a couple times. It comes out to be just about 9 inches all around. So once you've figured out the circumference of your bat, you'll want to add a 1/2 inch seam allowance, or whatever you care to use. I personally use 1/2 inch. Either way, add in your seam allowance. Now using that number, so in my case 9.5, you'll divide that by pi. That's going to get us the exact diameter of the top. So this could be maybe a little convoluted or excessive. I like to overcomplicate things, but it works for me. So in this case, it comes out to like 3.02 with my 9.5 inch measurement, so I'm going to round down to 3 inches. So then I'm going to take and find, I'm going to take and use my compass and make a circle equal to 3 inches in diameter, so 1.5 inch circumference. If you don't have a compass lying about, you can get them at Walmart, Walgreens, etc. They're super useful. You can just measure it out and freehand it if you're good enough to do that. I personally am not, so I'm going to use my handy dandy compass to measure that out. And then once we've gotten that eked out on paper, I'm going to cut it out, and we're going to cut out the cloth for the base of the weapon. Now I'm not going to go into doing the entire weapon. I'm just going to use a little bit of short scrap cloth that I've got. But when you measure the length of your bat, you'll measure it from where you want the cover to end up to the very tip. Add just a little bit for seam allowance, maybe a 1/2 inch at most, and then add another 1.5 inches for your drawstring. I'll cover how to do drawstrings on covers in another video, but just throw that out there while we're talking on it. Alright, now once you've got your pieces cut out, we're ready to go ahead and pin our project, which is important. I do this before sewing the cover in half, and the pinning is kind of an important step, because where you start sewing is very important. Common mistake I used to make, which could be why my covers used to turn out so poorly when making these in the beginning, was I would start sewing them right here on the edge. So I would start sewing where my seam allowance is supposed to be. So come in equal to your seam allowance, put the tip of your, I don't know if you can see that or not, but tip of the circle in for seam allowance. So in this case, I'm coming in 1/2 inch and pin that in place. And then just every point where your circle starts to round off and taper, place another pin and pin it all the way around. Alright, and if you did everything correctly, which if you followed these directions you should have, when you come back around, your two pieces for seam allowance will match right up when you're all done pinning. Now, I should have mentioned it a little bit earlier, but to reiterate, if you're going to be doing a drawstring cover, which I highly recommend, before you do any of this, you'll sew your drawstring in. So be sure to check out the video on how to sew in a drawstring, and do that step before you get around to doing your tip. You can do the tip first because we haven't sewn the sides, but before you sew the sides, you absolutely have to do the drawstring. Well, it's the easiest way to do it. You can do a drawstring on something that's already sewn. It's just a pain in the butt. Alright, so let's get sewing. Alright, so sewing the cover. When you start, you want to start at the very first pin that you placed. And as you sew, you're going to be pulling along your, you can't really see it here, but if you're at all familiar with the sewing machine, you note that the little tick marks to the right and left of your presser foot indicate seam allowance gap. So make sure you stay consistent on where you're sewing. Otherwise, your stitch is going to wander and it's going to be kind of a mess. Now, for sewing these on, you can use a regular straight stitch. If your machine doesn't do an automatic double stitch, go ahead and double stitch the entire thing. Otherwise, you're going to find your piece fraying out and going kind of crazy after no time at all. I'm fortunate enough that my machine has an auto double stitch, so I don't have to mess with that, but there we have it. Let's get sewing. Now, as you sew, you want to be real careful. First I should mention, I'm only giving about maybe a 1/4 inch seam allowance here at the top, maybe 1/8 inch. So I'm not giving that full 1/2 inch. Don't do the 1/2 inch here at the Don't do the 1/2 inch here at the top. Otherwise, it's going to end up a bit too small. Okay. And as you go around, I better say this before I get started because you won't be able to hear me, you want to make sure that you're pulling your cloth out flat and rotating it on the end. That way none of these little bunches get sewn in, because that would pretty much ruin it. You'd have to seam rip it, it'd be a pain. As you get to the end here, you're going to just sew up, right on up to the point where you started. And again, make sure you're not sewing over your previous stitching, because you'd start sewing your body in, and that really messes things up. So that's all sewn around. Our seam allowances meet up, and our stitching has gone all the way around our circle. So now, with everything still on the outside, press your seam allowance together and start at the point where your stitching ended. Otherwise you'll have a little gap. Put your thread in there, and then you can kind of adjust it heading out towards your actual seam allowance. So I'm at 5/8. I need to go out just about 1/8. And you can pin this part as well, which I obviously should have done because I wasn't paying attention and sewed these two pieces off. So let's just go ahead and redo that part. See, everyone makes mistakes. Pinning helps you prevent making mistakes and saves you a lot of time and frustration in the future. So we can all just call that a lesson learned, right? So, now making sure our pieces are nice and lined up, let's continue. Okay, so now we'll flip this inside out and see how we did for fit. But taking a look at it now, get a nice smooth cover, none of that weird pinching or anything like that. That's just old thread from when I accidentally meandered off. So let's take our bat and slide her on and see how we did. Alright, so that is the completed cover. Nice and skin tight, which is going to help our weapon last longer and just plain look better anyway. And yeah, I didn't do the complete bat, just grabbed some scrap to work with. Nice smooth flat top with our circle in there. Mine never do quite get to the edge completely. Could be a little bit of a design flaw there, but I haven't yet figured out how to get them all fitting nice and perfect every time. I hope that helps you guys out, and if this helped you out, please like and subscribe, and I'll try and get more content up soon. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.